Hello everybody, this is Chance Paladin, and welcome to another installation of Chance Paladin Narrates a Story, written by Chance Paladin. This book is narrated in front of a live streaming audience. Nothing in these books are medical, dental, vision, legal, moral, ethical, or otherwise instructions on how to do anything. Read at your own risk and responsibility. This is book number 12 of Rats and Locusts, and some legalese. All rights reserved. No portion of this book may be reproduced in any form without permission from the author, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead and actual events are purely coincidental. Content advisory is as follows. I write post-apocalypse stories, therefore portions of these stories are intended for mature audiences. There's about as much romance as you would expect in a typical post-apocalypse scenario. Explicit sexual acts were included or germane to the story, not intended to be gratuitous or fetishized. There isn't really any hard swearing worse than what you hear on cable. There's a moderate range of violence as would be expected in a post-apocalypse story. However, the suffering aspects are not deliberately glamorized or embellished upon. So with that, let's get started. Forward. Someone asked me how the cities got so bad. It's an easy answer. The progressives, aka regressives, like to control and be controlled. They like to be told what to do. They like every facet of their being under an illusion of choice and diversity. Constantly happy as long as someone else is a class underneath them to pity on is needed. They all conglomerated in a place where they could do that easily, the city. All the moderates didn't like being told what to do, so they moved away. If moderates don't like something, they simply won't do it. Progressives, on the other hand, if they don't like something, they force that decision on everybody. They can usually be caught soon after not following their own bizarre rules. The dichotomy pushes each side further and further away and mashes the progressives closer and closer together. They huddle in place like cattle, waiting for the next leader to go let them know when to eat and sleep, all the while their money is being stolen out from under them. They are dividing and unifying at micro levels, eating and providing to each other like a self-sustaining symbiotic virus. Chapter 1. Fun and Games. Class Stronghold, 3 years and 6 months after the collapse. Early summer. There was a cat walking around the stronghold outside with a youngling rodent in its mouth. Nobody could get the rodent away from the cat, and the cat was quite proud of itself. It wouldn't put the rodent down, though. The cat had to parade it around the farm to let everyone and everything know in the area what had happened. Before the cat can complete its parade of pip squeak screaming, the mouse expired. The cat, not fully satisfied, tossed it aside to try to find a new one. The cat knew these were dirty and needed to be left on the outskirts of the farm so they didn't infect anybody the cats were sworn to protect. The kids were horrified when they came into class, not knowing what was going on for the strange event. I told them I had the perfect story to put it into context. The story of Ricky, under the city, 2 months earlier, dawn, spring. Chapter 2, Too Early. It was time for Ricky to get up. He knew this because he felt gnawing at his toes. Ricky opened one eye, then the other, then wiggled his toes to stop the gnawing. He said to himself in his mind, "I'm not dead yet." He heard the claws scurry away, heard some chattering in his ear, and fumbled to his feet. It was cold, but all the rags he wore kept him warm throughout the cold and breezy nights. Ricky was below average in height, and not at all handsome by current society standards. Maybe that's why a long time ago he decided to start living in the sewers. He never noticed the electricity go out, or everyone whining and starving. It had been life as usual for him. The rats had said something about a collapse, but he didn't really know what that meant. Life had collapsed for him long before the rest of society's had. That was until today, one day when everything changed. He had been in the normal process the last few days of doing his normal thing down in the sewers, which was working on his subterranean hideouts with his limited welding skills and scavenged metal, when something happened. He looked up at a drain and noticed it was raining in the city. There was always water dripping down because it rained 9 months out of the year, but this time it was different. It reminded him of something, like someone was pouring a 5-gallon bucket of water down the drain, except it didn't stop with 5 gallons. 5 gallons turned to 10, 10 turned into 100, and it didn't stop. Ricky was currently residing at the lower end of the sewers, closer to the ocean. The cool and clean ocean air blew in and kept it somewhat refreshing and tolerable. He felt something in his leg again, and an unusually large rat jumped onto his shoe and held onto his leg. It chattered at him. Ricky walked down to the end of the sewer where some light shined down on some planter boxes he had where some partial sun could shine on them. It was growing lavender and the rain came down then drained. It both filtered the water so it was drinkable and made it to where his lavender garden wouldn't get soggy. Something tugged at Ricky's nerves again. This wasn't right. A voice in his head was telling him that something was wrong and he had to leave. Ricky looked around and all the rats were leaving. It was time for Ricky to leave as well. Ricky took as much of the processed lavender and stuffed it in his pockets of his smaller pants. Oh, no, off his smaller plants. Then he grabbed his biggest and strongest potted lavender bush and threw his pack on and followed the rats. As he scurried with the rats, he realized he hadn't heard vehicles in a while. Maybe months? Years? He wasn't sure why he was finally wondering this now. Maybe he'd been so at peace that he forgot down here with the rats. Ricky didn't feel at peace now, though. Maybe he'd heard some cars in the last few months, albeit briefly. As he ran by his meager greenhouse, which was getting his shade-friendly crops ready for the soon warmer days, he had to pass right by them. He barely had time to grab his heirloom seed bags that he'd been working on, as Ricky noticed the rats picking up pace. They ran and they ran, up an incline and to the left, up another incline and to the right. Ricky looked down in the ditches to see the water rushing by faster than he'd ever seen it, and it was getting higher. Ricky'd never seen the water that high before, and it was as if an entire lake was trying to cram through his tiny area at once. Ricky passed the main pipes leading to his area as they all but exploded with water. He climbed about 12 feet a ladder and watched as uncountable gallons of water rushed through. The sound was deafening. He had to be careful to climb the ladder with his moderately sized lavender plant, but was able to manage it safely as the water rushed below. Ricky sat on his new perch, as his memory rebounded, realization that there was no longer a rat on his shoe. Ricky looked around desperately but couldn't find his friend. Then Ricky heard squeaking next to his ear and saw the rat had managed to hang on through the scurrying and ladder climbing so his buddy was safe. Yeah, that was a close one. What's going on? More chattering. Yeah, I'm hungry too. I guess we'll try to wait this out. Ricky rummaged around in the shadows and opened up a steel container that was buried under rags, a little down the raised portion of the sewer that he was on. It had been a service box before, but he repurposed it to store food. Inside were many cases of MREs. Ricky had ready-to-eat food hidden all throughout the sewers. He hadn't touched this one in ages and was glad it was still here. Ricky grabbed a random MRE and shut the hatch before anything could get in, then covered it back up with the rags. He took some lavender out of his pocket and mashed it over the rags to keep the bugs off. He took another handful out of his pocket, mashed it up, and rubbed it all over the filthy rags he was wearing. It made him smell good. He took a moment to reach out with his senses and felt no bugs. Ricky smiled and opened up his MRE. Ricky and his little buddies shared the MRE for about half an hour. There was no easing of the water pressure down below. This is insane, worse than even that big storm a few years back. The rat chattered in his ear. Something else, you say? More chattering. Ricky stared down at the water rushing by, his mind completely blank. An unknown amount of time passed before Ricky snapped out of it. Ricky knew there was nowhere to get from where he was to the unflooded part of the sewer. If any part of it actually remained unflooded, he mentally pictured the entire area in his head, and every point was a dead end or went down into rushing water. There was only one place to go, and that was up